The desperate distress call. The red warning lights flashed across the bridge of the starlight dawn, painting shadows that danced across Captain Jiho's pale blue skin. His antenna twitched nervously as he stared at the main screen, which showed nothing but unfamiliar stars scattered across the endless void of space. The ship's navigation system had failed 6 hours ago, and now they were completely lost in an unmapped region. "Status report," Jiho called out, his voice steady despite the growing worry in his chest. As an Aenian, he was proud of his species' reputation for staying calm and logical in any situation. But right now, that reputation was being tested. First Officer Hannah looked up from her control panel, her silver eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "Captain, the main AI is still giving us conflicting readings. According to one sensor, we're in Sector 7, but another says we're somewhere near the edge territories. That's impossible. Those regions are light years apart." Jiho walked over to her station, his lightweight frame moving gracefully in the ship's artificial gravity. The Starlight Dawn was one of the most advanced exploration vessels in the Galactic Federation's fleet, and its AI system was supposed to be foolproof. Yet here they were, lost in space like ancient sailors who had lost their compass. "Engineering report," Jiho said, turning to Tanya, the communications officer. "The backup systems are also malfunctioning," Tanya reported, her purple uniform wrinkled from the long hours of trying to solve their crisis. "And sir, we have another problem. Life support is starting to show strain. We have maybe 4 days of supplies left." The bridge fell silent. 4 days wasn't much time to figure out where they were and how to get back to gnome space. Jiho looked around at his crew. They were all in like him, tall and blue-skinned with antennae that helped them sense electromagnetic fields. They were brilliant with technology, but right now, all their advanced knowledge wasn't helping. Suddenly, Hannah stood up, her antenna pointing forward, a sign of excitement or an important thought among their people. "Captain, I have an idea. It's unusual, but given our situation." Jiho encouraged her to continue. At this point, he was ready to consider anything. "We could call the humans for help," Hannah said quickly, like someone ripping off a bandage. Several crew members gasped. Humans were new to the Galactic Federation, hailing from a planet called Earth, a death world with high gravity, extreme weather, and countless predators. The humans themselves were considered dangerous by many species. They were stronger, faster, and more aggressive than most galactic citizens, built by evolution to survive conditions that would kill most sentient beings. "A human on our ship?" Tanya asked, her voice shaking slightly. Jiho raised his hand for silence. "Tell me more, Hannah. Why a human?" Hannah's confidence grew as she explained. "I've been studying their navigation techniques. They have this thing called intuition. It's like they can sense when something is wrong, even when all the data says everything is fine. And they're incredibly good at surviving lost-in-space scenarios. Their whole history is full of stories about finding their way in unknown territories." Jiho walked to the main viewport, watching the strange stars twinkle. His logical mind wrestled with desperation. Bringing a Deathworlder aboard went against all his training and instincts. But they were running out of options and time. "Do we have any human navigation experts within range?" he asked finally. Hannah quickly checked her console. "Yes, sir. There's a human station 3 light jumps from our last known position. They have a navigator there who specializes in rescue operations." Jiho took a deep breath. "Send the distress call. Make it clear we need navigation assistance." He looked around at his nervous crew. "We're about to meet our first human. An unlikely savior arrives." Sunky was eating his lunch when the emergency call came in. He sat in the observation deck of stations, a sandwich halfway to his mouth, watching the stars through the reinforced windows. The station's artificial gravity was set to match the comfort levels of most alien species, which meant Sumke felt like he was almost floating. Not that he minded. After 5 years in space, he had gotten used to it. "Navigator Sumke," the station's AI announced, Incoming emergency transmission from the Galactic exploration vessel Starlight Dawn. Priority level urgent. Sunky put down his sandwich and sat up straight. Play it. A holographic screen appeared in front of him, showing a blue-skinned alien with gentle antenna. This is Captain Geo of the Starlight Dawn. We are lost in an unmapped region with failing navigation systems. We request immediate assistance from Navigator Sunky, if available. A small smile crossed Sunky's face. This wasn't the first time he'd gotten such a call. Many aliens didn't like working with humans, but they sure came running when they needed help. Sunky pressed the response button. This is Navigator Sunky. I can be ready to help in 30 minutes. The relief on Captain Geo's face was clear, even across species. Thank you, Navigator. We will send our last known coordinates. As Sunky packed his emergency kit, his station commander, a tall insectoid named Rita, clicked her mandibles nervously. Are you sure about this, Sunky? The Nans are sensitive. They get nervous around humans. They're also lost and running out of options, Sunky replied, checking his personal navigation tools. He had learned early on not to rely only on alien technology. Sometimes the old ways, the human ways, worked better. Besides, I'm used to aliens being nervous around me. Rita said, just try not to frighten them. No sudden movements, no showing teeth when you smile, and please don't do any of those crazy human things you're famous for. Sunky laughed as he packed his ancient compass, a gift from his grandmother. You know what I mean. That time you manually piloted a ship through an asteroid field, or when you used your own body weight to test artificial gravity fluctuations. The stories about you make some species faint. Those crazy things saved lives, Sunky pointed out. He finished packing and stood up, automatically compensating for the light gravity. And sometimes, the crazy solution is the right solution. The rescue shuttle was ready in the landing bay. It was a small ship, built for speed and maneuverability. Sunky did his pre-flight checks while reviewing the Starlight Dawn's last known coordinates. Something about them seemed odd, but he couldn't put his finger on what. That was his human intuition talking. Another thing that made aliens nervous. As he prepared for launch, he received a final message from the Starlight Dawn. The ship's first officer, Hannah, appeared on the screen. Navigator Sunky, I should warn you. Some of our crew have never met a human before. Don't worry, Sunky said, keeping his voice gentle and trying not to show his teeth when he smiled. I'll be on my best behavior. The journey to the Starlight Dawn's location took 3 hours. Sunky spent the time studying the ship's specifications and the area where they were lost. He noticed something interesting. The region they were in had been marked as navigationally unstable in some very old Earth sailing records. Modern ships usually ignored such outdated warnings, but Sunky had learned that ancient sailors often knew things that modern sensors missed. As his shuttle approached the Starlight Dawn, he got his first good look at the ship. It was beautiful, sleek and silver, built with the Nan's famous attention to detail. But something about the way it floated in space seemed wrong. The ship was drifting in a pattern that didn't match any known gravitational effects. Starlight Dawn, this is Navigator Sunky requesting permission to dock, Sunky said. There was a pause before Captain Geo's voice came through. Permission granted, Navigator. Please use Docking Bay 3 and welcome. Sunky guided his shuttle toward the docking bay, already forming theories about what might have gone wrong. One thing was certain, this wasn't going to be a simple navigation problem. But that was fine with him. After all, solving impossible problems was what humans did best. Time to show them what a Deathworlder can do. He muttered to himself as the docking clamps engage, unlocking the secrets of the ghost zone. Captain Geo stood at the docking bay entrance with First Officer Hannah and Security Chief DeYoung. All three of them tried not to flinch when they heard the heavy footsteps coming from the other side of the airlock. The sound reminded them that humans were built for a planet with much stronger gravity than their own world. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss, and Sunky stepped through. The three Nans unconsciously took a small step back. He was shorter than them, but his strong build made him look powerful and solid compared to their slim frames. He carried a black bag over his shoulder and wore a standard Federation uniform that seemed to stretch across his muscular shoulders. "Welcome aboard the Starlight Dawn," Jiho said, proud that his voice remained steady. "I am Captain Jiho." Sumki nodded and carefully kept his hands visible. He had dealt with nervous aliens before and knew how to appear less threatening. "Thank you, Captain. I hope I can help solve your navigation problems." Hannah's antenna twitched with interest as she studied the human. She had read about humans, but had never seen one up close. "Your footsteps," she said before she could stop herself. "They're very heavy." Sumki smiled without showing his teeth. "Sorry about that. Earth's gravity is about twice what you're used to. I can try to walk more lightly." Security Chief De Young's hand stayed close to his stun baton, but he tried to hide his nervousness. "We should go to the bridge," he suggested. "The captain can explain our situation there." As they walked through the corridors, crew members stopped to stare at Sumki. Some quickly entered side rooms or pressed themselves against walls to avoid getting too close. Sumki pretended not to notice, but he slowed his pace and made his movements more deliberate and smooth. "Your ship is beautiful," Sumki said, trying to ease the tension. "Narian engineering is famous throughout the galaxy." "Thank you," Jiho replied, starting to relax a little. This human seemed polite and professional, not at all like the wild creatures some stories described. Though right now, their famous engineering wasn't helping them much. They reached the bridge, and Sumki immediately noticed how the crew tensed at his presence. He stayed near the door, giving them space. "Could you show me your navigation readings from when the problem started?" Hannah asked, her curiosity beginning to overcome her fear. She brought up the data on the main screen. "The readings make no sense. It's like we're in two places at once." Sumki studied the screen, his eyes narrowing. He took something from his bag that made several crew members gasp. It looked like a simple metal compass in a wooden box. "Is that primitive Earth technology?" De Young asked, unable to hide his surprise. "Sometimes old technology sees things that new technology misses," Sumki explained. He held up the compass and walked slowly around the bridge, the crew watching in fascination as he stopped at different points, checking readings and making notes on his tablet. "That's interesting," he muttered, mostly to himself. "What is it?" Jiho asked, moving closer despite his instincts telling him to keep his distance. "Your ship's AI isn't malfunctioning," Sumki said. "It's actually working perfectly, too perfectly, in fact. That's the problem." Hannah's antenna perked forward. "I don't understand." Sumki carefully put his compass away. "Your sensors are designed to be extremely precise, to detect and measure everything perfectly. But space isn't perfect. Sometimes it's messy, chaotic, and strange. Humans learned this the hard way during our early space exploration." The bridge crew listened intently, their fear temporarily forgotten as their natural scientific curiosity took over. Even De Young had moved his hand away from his stun baton. "So what's really happening to our ship?" Jiho asked. Sumki walked to the main viewport, his movements now more natural, as he forgot to make them deliberately gentle. "Your ship has wandered into what we humans used to call a ghost zone, a region of space where normal rules don't quite apply. Your precise instruments are trying to make sense of it, but they can't. That's why they're giving you impossible readings." "A ghost zone." Captain Jiho repeated the strange human term with confusion. "There's no such thing in our scientific records." Sumki connected his tablet to the ship's main computer. Unlike the elegant touch displays the Nans used, his tablet was covered in a thick protective case, another reminder of humanity's need to make things sturdy. Earth ships discovered these zones during our early space exploration. We lost several ships before we learned to recognize the signs. Hannah moved closer to look at his screen, her natural curiosity winning over her caution. "But how can a region of space just not follow normal rules?" "Think of it like a whirlpool in the ocean," Sumki explained, bringing up a simple diagram. From far away, the ocean looks calm. But get too close, and suddenly normal navigation becomes impossible. These space zones work the same way. The bridge crew gathered around, maintaining a careful distance but clearly interested. Sunky pulled out his compass again and held it up to various screens, showing their sensor data. "Look here," he pointed. "Your eye is detecting something, but it's programmed to only report things that make logical sense. It's like trying to describe a color to someone who can't see it." De Young frowned. "But how can your primitive compass help when our advanced sensors can't?" "Because it's not trying to be perfect," Sunky said with a patient smile. "Sometimes imperfect tools give you a better picture of an imperfect situation." He walked to different parts of the bridge, holding his compass. "Watch how it doesn't point consistently in any direction. That's because the magnetic fields in this region are twisted." He pulled up an old Earth navigation chart on his tablet. These zones appear in old Earth sailing records too. Sailors would report their compasses spinning wildly and their ships getting lost in perfectly clear weather. Everyone thought they were just telling stories until we started exploring space. Captain Jiho's antenna twitched with interest. "Are you saying we should navigate like ancient Earth sailors?" "Not exactly," Sunky said, already typing commands into the ship's computer. "But we can use their methods to help your eye make sense of what it's seeing. The trick is to stop trying to find a perfect path and look for patterns in the chaos instead." The bridge crew leaned in, fascinated by this human's unorthodox approach. As Sunky continued to work, they began to understand that their only hope of escaping this ghost zone might lie in the hands of a Deathworlder. A daring escape plan. The bridge was filled with a tense silence as Sunky worked, his fingers flying across the ship's control systems. The Nans watched in rapt attention, their initial fear replaced by a growing sense of curiosity and perhaps even a glimmer of hope. Jiho approached Sunky, his antenna twitching with a mixture of caution and intrigue. "Navigator, what exactly are you doing?" Sunky looked up from his tablet, a determined expression on his face. "Captain, your ship's sensors are designed to give you a perfect, logical picture of your surroundings. But this ghost zone doesn't play by those rules. We need to find a way to navigate using the imperfect data." He gestured to the main view screen, which displayed a chaotic mess of overlapping sensor readings. "Look at this. Your instruments are detecting multiple gravitational fields, magnetic anomalies, and spatial distortions, all at the same time. It's like the laws of physics are being bent and twisted around us." Hana leaned in, her silver eyes narrowed in concentration. "So how do we find our way out of this?" Sunky tapped a few more commands into the console, bringing up a series of overlapping lines and coordinates. "I'm mapping the patterns in the sensor data. There seems to be a sort of current flowing through this region, like an underwater river in the ocean." He turned to face the bridge crew, his expression grave. "If we time it right, we might be able to ride this current and use it to guide us out of the ghost zone. But it's going to be incredibly risky. One wrong move, and we could be lost forever." Jiho's antenna drooped slightly, betraying his growing unease. "What kind of wrong move are we talking about, Navigator?" Sunky took a deep breath. "We'll need to shut down your main engines and navigation systems completely. We can't rely on them in this environment. Instead, we'll use the shuttle's thrusters and my compass to manually pilot the Starlight Dawn through the anomaly." The bridge erupted in a chorus of alarmed protests. Daeyoung stepped forward, his hand gripping his stun baton. "Absolutely not. You're asking us to trust our lives to a primitive human tool and your own instincts. This is madness." Jiho raised a hand, silencing the security chief. "Navigator, are you certain this will work?" Sunky met the captain's gaze steadily. "No, I'm not certain. But it's the only chance we have. Your ship's systems are being torn apart by this ghost zone. We need to find a way to work with it, not fight against it." Hana moved closer to Sunky, her antenna twitching with a mixture of fear and fascination. "If we do this, what are our chances of survival?" Sunky's expression was grave. "Honestly, I'd say it's a 50-50 proposition. We might make it through, or we could be torn apart by the anomalies. He paused, then added, but if we do nothing, we'll almost certainly run out of life support within the next 2 days. The bridge fell silent as the Nans considered their options. Joe looked around at his crew, seeing the same mixture of terror and reluctant acceptance on their faces. Finally, he turned to Sunky and nodded. Very well, Navigator. We'll try your plan. But I want every member of this crew to understand the risks involved. If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. No one moved. Dayoung's grip on his baton relaxed, and Hannah's antenna stood tall, a sign of determination among her people. Sunky allowed himself a small, humorless smile. Then let's get to work. We don't have much time. As the Starlight Dawn's crew began the preparations for their daring escape, Sunky silently said a prayer to the ancient human deities he'd long since stopped believing in. This was going to be the most dangerous thing he'd ever done, but he'd be damned if he was going to let these Nans die out here, lost and alone. Homeward bound, the Starlight Dawn lurched and shuddered as it navigated the treacherous currents of the Ghost Zone, its sleek silver hull battered by the twisting, chaotic energies that surrounded it. On the bridge, Sunky stood with one hand gripping the edge of the console, his eyes narrowed in concentration as he guided the ship through the perilous passage. The 9 crew watched in a mixture of awe and terror, their antennae twitching with the strain of the situation. Captain Jiho's face was taut with tension, but his voice remained steady as he called out readings and relayed Sunky's instructions to the rest of the ship. Thrusters at 30%. Hold position. Sunky barked, his gaze fixed on the flickering data displays. We need to ride this current, not fight it. The Starlight Dawn shuddered again, and several crew members clutched at the nearest bulkheads to keep their footing. But the ship held its course, guided by Sunky's unwavering hand and the ancient human compass that he had refused to let go of. Time seemed to stretch and distort around them, the usual rhythms of space and time warping and bending in ways that defied all logic. Sunky's brow furrowed as he adjusted their trajectory, his movements smooth and precise despite the chaos that surrounded them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Starlight Dawn burst free of the Ghost Zone, emerging into a familiar star field. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge, and Jiho's antenna rose in a gesture of triumph. We made it, he breathed, his eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Navigator Sunky, I don't know how to thank you. Sunky allowed himself a small, weary smile. Just get me back to my shuttle, Captain. I've had enough of your ghost zones to last a lifetime. As Sunky prepared to depart, the 9 crew gathered around him, their initial fear and skepticism replaced by a newfound respect and admiration. Hannah stepped forward, her silver eyes shining. What you did, Navigator, it was incredible. We never could have made it out of there without your help. Sunky shrugged, suddenly feeling self-conscious under the weight of their attention. I just did what any human would have done. We're pretty good at surviving in hostile environments, you know. Jiho clasped Sunky's hand in a firm grip. That may be true, but you did more than just survive. You saved us all. His antenna twitched with a gesture of deep respect. On behalf of the entire crew of the Starlight Dawn, thank you. As Sunky made his way back to his shuttle, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. He had faced down the unknown, defied the expectations of his alien companions, and emerged victorious. It was a quintessential human story, one that he knew would be passed down among the Nans for generations to come. But more than that, he had forged a connection with these strange, blue-skinned beings, a bond of trust and mutual understanding that transcended the barriers of species and culture. As he fired up the shuttle's engines and prepared to depart, Sunky couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. In a strange way, he was going to miss these Nans and their endless fascination with the human way of doing things. With a final wave, Sunky guided his shuttle away from the Starlight Dawn, already planning his next adventure. After all, where there were mysteries to be solved and impossible odds to overcome, There was sure to be a human ready to take on the challenge. As the Starlight Dawn set course for home, the Nan crew gazed out at the stars, their minds still reeling from the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. They had learned a valuable lesson that day, that sometimes the most advanced technology was no match for the ingenuity, resilience, and sheer determination of a Deathworlder. And as they looked to the future, they couldn't help but wonder, what other wonders and terrors might the galaxy hold, and who else might they encounter that could challenge their very understanding of the universe?